It's the Cambrian period, 508 million years ago, and you are getting ready to scuba dive off the rocky coast of a long-forgotten continent. During this time, Earth is a baking hot, humid water world, and in terms of spotting wildlife, this is going to be awesome. You are here to witness life during the Cambrian Explosion, a rapid and astonishing diversification of almost all the animal phyla that are still around today. The animals of the previous Ediacaran period, simple filter feeders and strange evolutionary experiments, had disappeared by the Cambrian. The Cambrian fauna that replaced them were mobile, dynamic creatures with unique specializations to give them an edge for survival. This was the time of the Trilobites, mollusks, worms, arthropods, and our own ancestors, the earliest chordates. You're wading out into a shallow cove on the edge of the Iapetus Ocean on the south coast of an ancient continent called Laurentia. Many millions of years from now, this continent will one day be part of North America. All the animals you're about to meet on this scuba adventure would one day be discovered in the Canadian Rockies, in a famous fossil formation called the Burgess Shale. But back in Cambrian times, there was no North America, or Europe, or Asia, or any other continents as we know them. If we rewind the position of tectonic plates back to 508 million years ago, the land masses were in completely different places. There were no ice caps at the poles to lock away water, so the sea levels were much higher in the Cambrian, and as a result, around 85% of the Earth was covered in oceans. Laurentia was one of the few continents that was above sea level during the Cambrian. It is called a craton, a stable piece of land which has survived the many geologic changes and movements over hundreds of millions of years. In the past 600 million years, Laurentia was a central part of the ancient supercontinent Rodinia in the Tonian period, and when Rodinia fractured apart, it reorganized into the short-lived continent of Pannotia in the Ediacaran. By the Cambrian, it had separated into its own separate continent and drifted away to its current position to enjoy the sunshine just below the equator. South of Laurentia were other continents as well. The ancient cratons of Siberia and Baltica, which today are part of Eurasia, were islands in the Iapetus Ocean in the southern hemisphere. And down around the South Pole was Gondwana, the largest continent on Earth. On the surface of the water, the sun is beating down on this scorching hot equatorial landscape. The humid tropical atmosphere is suffocating, and you're sweating under your mask. The water you're swimming in is extremely warm at the surface, with temperatures upwards of 35 degrees Celsius. The waves are rough, breaking into crests of white foam as they surge towards the beach. It's time to go down to the Cambrian reef, so you swim out further towards the rocky headland and dive under the water. Under the water, it is crystal clear and turquoise blue, and with beautiful clarity, you see the Cambrian reef expanding across the ocean floor in all its glory. Just a few meters down is the sea floor, and as you approach, something small wiggles past. It's some kind of tiny marine animal, only as big as your finger. It has a long, flat shape that ripples in an elegant up and down wave as it swims. It's actually kind of cute. At first you think it's some sort of fish, but in the Cambrian, true fish don't exist yet. Upon closer inspection, this is clearly something different. It has segments along its body with swimming flaps on each side, and a long proboscis that comes to an end with a tiny claw. But the weirdest feature of this animal are its eyes. It has 5 of them, and they pop up on stalks. This creature is called Opabinia, and its body plan is pretty revolutionary for this time on Earth. Just a few million years ago during the Ediacaran period, nothing was capable of free swimming like this. Nothing had eyes like this, and many life forms didn't even have mouths or digestive systems. These fundamental organs and systems were evolving in animals like Opabinia because life was getting competitive. When a change in the environment suddenly opens up new food sources, survival strategies, and ecological niches, life can rapidly diversify into all kinds of different forms. This is called an adaptive radiation, and the one that took place in the Cambrian is probably the most famous of them all. It's called the Cambrian Explosion. Basic organs had evolved, and animals were learning to swim, hunt, hide, and dig. They were evolving armor and spikes, limbs, teeth, and eyes, and the ocean was full of possibilities. The causes of the Cambrian explosion are still being debated, but it's thought that the end of the Baconurian glaciation at the start of the Cambrian may be involved. As the ice caps and glaciers melted, algae thrived in the warmer temperatures. In turn, atmospheric and ocean oxygen went up, enriching the water chemistry for complex life to thrive. You notice more Opabinia swimming past. Dozens of them, waving and rippling as they scoot past you and make their way down to the safety of the reef. Over there, another animal passes by. It's Nectocaris, a mysterious animal that kind of looks like a very early squid, but that's still debated. It peels off and ducks into a crevice. This whole place feels so surreal. At the bottom of the reef, life is everywhere. There are animals swimming and crawling through an undersea landscape of hollow cones and tubes, with shells embedded in the sand and feathery filter feeders drifting in the current. Paleozoic reefs are not like modern reefs, and you won't find many corals here, although this is where they first show up in fossils. Instead, life is building around reefs of Archaeocyanthus sponges, early builders that proliferated throughout the Cambrian. Most of the sponges are shaped like horns about 30 centimeters tall. Some look like bowls, and others like towers that have sections fitted together like nested cups. Each one pumps seawater through their hard structure to absorb nutrients and expel filtered water in the process. Look over there. Stripy comb jellies called Tenorhabdotus are rippling through the water, beating their tiny cilia as they drift about and filter the zooplankton. They are in the phylum Ctenophora, and they've already existed for tens of millions of years since they first appeared back in the Proterozoic Eon. You see a cnidarian called Mackenzie attached to a rock on the sea floor. It's a kind of early sea anemone shaped like a long, deflated fabric bag. It is propped upright and waving in the current. Mackenzie are surprisingly abundant here, and they attach to everything from sponge cones to brachiopod shells. Under the sponge cones is a large community of ostracods lying on the seafloor, also known as seed shrimp. They are early crustaceans, a subphylum of the arthropods. Each one is just the size of an apple seed, with a bivalve shell for protection. You notice some of them opening up to reveal small legs, and they begin to crawl around. You reach down and pick up an empty shell of an animal called a brachiopod, also called lamp shells. It's Micromitra burgessensis, a shelled animal about the size of your fingernail. You turn it over. It has a symmetrical shell and fine bristles coming from the edge. You release it and it starts to drift back to the bottom. You pick up a larger brachiopod shell called Lingulella. When we think of hinged shells in a modern reef ecosystem, we picture mollusk bivalves like clams, mussels, cockles, or scallops. Some mollusk bivalves had their start in the Cambrian, but it was the brachiopods which are the most abundant in the Paleozoic. While they look pretty much the same, they're actually not closely related at all. So what's the difference between a bivalve and a brachiopod? The first difference is in their symmetry. Brachiopods have a symmetry that cuts down through their valves, while bivalves are symmetrical between their valves. Inside their shells, brachiopods have an organ called a lophophore, a circular arrangement of tentacles surrounding the mouth for respiration and to filter food from the seawater. They can also have a pedicle, a stalk that lets them attach to hard places. Bivalves, meanwhile, breathe using gills. They have a single foot to dig and to move, and they have an organ called a siphon to channel water to the gills and for feeding. You spot a cluster of brachiopods attached to a sponge horn. You see their stalks and their lophophores reaching out and snatching detritus from the water. There are many types of mollusks that first show up in the Cambrian. There were bivalves like Fordilla, gastropods like Chippewaella, and even archaic cephalopods that include Nitoconus, and a small shelled animal called Plectronoceros, thought to be the very first squid. Some animals, meanwhile, are much more difficult to categorize. You see one now, sliding along. Meet Waiwaxia, a soft-bodied animal covered in defensive scales called sclerites, as well as rows of huge dorsal spines. This tiny thing, moving along down near the ostracods and Lingulella, might be a gastropod, but this is still debated. Another group that was highly successful in the Cambrian oceans were the echinoderms, which are early relatives of sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and starfish. Echinoderms have spiny skin, usually with 5-point symmetry, an internal skeleton, and a water vascular system derived from a central coelom cavity. The most common class in this Cambrian ocean are the crinoids, also called sea lilies, and you see many of them attached to the ocean floor and the sponge reef. They're waving at you, and they're very elegant. You spot Ecmatocrinus and Gogia drifting peacefully in the current. They're made up of a hard stalk anchored to the sea floor, leading to a cup-shaped structure with 5 or more feathery arms that surround a mouth and a digestive system. The Cambrian reef is also filled with a weird variety of much more mobile creatures. In the Cambrian, for the first time, animals adopted a strategy of being mobile and actively hunting other living things to power their metabolisms. You can't see the Opabinia swarm anymore, but you're thrilled to see a Cambrian icon right below you. There's a consortium of Trilobites, and you spot a big tribe of them scuttling along the sea floor, leaving tiny pointed tracks behind them in the silt. They are some of the earliest arthropods that were part of the same phylum as all of today's insects, crustaceans, and arachnids. Trilobites have a segmented body which is divided into 3 lengthwise lobes, which is how they get their name. They have a half-moon-shaped head, multiple legs, and long antennae. They have hard shells of calcite and chitin. They have digestive systems, and they see using extremely sophisticated compound eyes. The most common trilobite eye, called the holochroal eye, was composed of tiny hexagonal lenses that could number over 15,000 individual lenses. Trilobites ranged in size from little coin-sized creatures to massive versions that would one day evolve as big as a t-shirt, crawling along the ocean floor in search of food to hunt, scavenge, or filter feed. You find a dead trilobite shell and lift it up, brushing away the sand. It feels light in your hand. Trilobites are some of the most numerous fossils of the Paleozoic era, and there are so many configurations of shapes, spikes, heads, and antennae that today there are over 25,000 described species. You watch the trilobites scuttling around, stopping as they pick at debris on the sea floor and crawling over the top of other animals. A tiny creature floats down right in front of your goggles, and you instinctively wave it out of the way. As it regains its equilibrium and continues to swim, you get a close look at it. It's another arthropod called Morella splendens, a tiny segmented animal the size of a beetle. As it moves towards the sea floor in a flurry of paddling limbs, you follow it along. It looks a little bit like a trilobite, but it is covered with specialized spikes and appendages. The most sensational are huge rear-facing spines that come from the side of its head and are as long as its body, and 2 more sprout from the base of the head. As it swims, its 26 limbs beat furiously against the current. You reach a large submerged sea stack and begin to swim around it. As you turn, a huge animal swims into view, and while it is less than half a meter long, it's significantly larger than anything you've seen so far. This massive thing takes you completely by surprise, and for a moment your blood runs cold. It's called anomalocaris, and it's a predatory arthropod in a group called the radiodonts. These hunters were some of the biggest known animals on Earth at this time, and while it is unlikely to be a threat to you, they were apex predators for many small Cambrian animals. The radiodonts earned their name for their large wheel-like teeth structures called oral cones. They had long, segmented bodies like lobsters that waved through the water, aided by swimming flaps that ran down their body, fan-shaped tails, large compound eyes like insects, and a pair of segmented appendages that were probably used to grip their prey. Anomalocaris means abnormal shrimp, and while it certainly looks strange, there were many similar radiodonts that lived in the Cambrian oceans. Another radiodont called Amplectobolua had specialized appendages that appeared to function like pincers. The smaller Snorkelling was not much longer than a scorpion, but it had an unusual third eye called a median eye on its forehead. You swim closer to the sea floor and watch a large trilobite the size of a frisbee march right over the top of a tiny lobopod called Ovatia vermis. As the trilobite passes, the smaller animal wriggles back onto its feet with strange, stumpy legs. It's definitely one of the freakiest looking creatures you've seen so far. It's part of a clade within Panarthropoda known as the lobopods, named after their stumpy, lobe-shaped feet. The most well-known lobopod is called Hallucigenia, which used 10 pairs of thin legs to walk across the sea floor, whilst along its back were rows of sharp defensive spines. Its relative Aeschyia resembled a large, swollen caterpillar with spiked legs and 2 extra limbs near its jawless mouth, which might have been used for grasping. One of Hallucigenia's relatives from the Chengjiang biota in modern-day China is a lobopod called Cardiodictyon, similar to Hallucigenia, but with 25 pairs of legs and claws near its head. This fossil site at Chengjiang is another exceptional Cambrian treasure trove. This is where the largest Cambrian animal ever discovered was living. Its name is Omnidens amplis, and while it is only known from its mouth parts, it is believed to be a gargantuan panarthropod and a close cousin of lobopods. It had a flat, worm-like body and a massive claw apparatus which it might have used to grab prey. Its body was estimated at 1.5 meters long, possibly making it the largest organism on Earth at the time. Beneath the sand, burrowing worms that began to appear in the Ediacaran were becoming abundant and growing to huge sizes. Priapulid worms, sometimes known by the unfortunate nickname of penis worms, lived in U-shaped burrows which they dug into the mud and came out to ambush prey. The most common priapulid is Otoya, a predatory worm with a spiked proboscis which it used for hunting. In the fossil record, it preserved so beautifully that undigested arthropods have been found in their stomachs. Wow, what a dive! It's also much to take in. The diversity of animal life in the Cambrian oceans is so incredible, so beautiful, and so wildly alien. But there are familiarities here too. The blueprints for almost all the major animal groups that exist in the present day were now established. All of these phyla which were here in the Cambrian, the chordates, arthropods, porifera, cnidarians, mollusks, echinoderms, priapulids, nematodes, and so on, represent all the animal phyla that still exist today. The only exception is the phylum of Bryozoa, which appeared several million years later in Ordovician. And what's even more amazing is that no new animal phyla have arisen since then. It all happened right here. So what exactly is a phylum? This is a taxonomic rank used to classify organisms. To see where it fits in, let's look at the complete hierarchy. If we start at the top, we have life split into 3 domains, which we first saw in the Archean and Proterozoic eons. They are the Archaea, bacteria, and Eukarya. From there are 7 major taxonomic ranks. Domain branches into kingdom, for example the domain of Eukarya branching into the kingdoms of animals, plants, and fungi. Phylum comes afterwards, followed by class, order, family, genus, and species. So the phyla that arose in the Cambrian are the largest subdivisions of the animal kingdom. While some phyla aren't around anymore, like the mysterious Diatozoans, most endured, and they're everywhere today. As white foam rushes past with every wave overhead, the anomalocaris dives down to the sponge reef. It is quite graceful as it swims, and as its huge swimming flaps power against the current, it probes at crevices in the reef. Suddenly, it flushes something out, which darts into view with a tiny, nimble body. It looks like a flat worm or maybe a simple fish. It's called Picaia, and it is no larger than a goldfish. It has a slim body similar to a lancelet, a leaf-shaped tail to power through the water, and 2 head protrusions that look like snail antennae. There's a rush, and the anomalocaris seizes it. This pichia is food. It's an interesting animal because it is a chordate, part of the phylum of animals which contain a flexible rod through its body called a notochord. This little creature might be, just maybe, an ancestor to all vertebrates that will one day include all mammals, reptiles, fish, birds, and amphibians. But pichia wasn't alone. There are other Cambrian chordates around the world as well. Others, like Ichthyes and Mylocynmingia, have been shown to have early gill-like structures and are sometimes considered to be the first ever fish. The Cambrian was one of the first periods to be named by geologists. The name was coined in 1835 by the British geologist Professor Adam Sedgwick, who was studying sedimentary rocks and fossils in Wales. The name comes from the word Cambria, a Latinized name for Wales. 74 years later, in 1909, an American paleontologist by the name of Charles Walcott discovered magnificent fossil beds in the Canadian Rockies. This fossil site is called the Burgess Shale, and it contains the fossils of the animals you're snorkeling with right now. Over the next few years, he and his team recovered over 65,000 fossil specimens from a site called the Walcott Quarry. The reason why the Burgess Shale is so special is because the fossils were preserved in an extraordinary way. They're called Lagerstätte fossil beds, and they form when organisms are buried by fine sediment with very little oxygen and very few bacteria. When this happens, decomposition is delayed for so long that perfect imprints of an organism results in amazing preservation of soft tissues. Animals with soft bodies that would normally not fossilize, such as worms, jellies, and pichia, plus hard-shelled creatures like trilobites and morella, were all found with exquisitely preserved shells, eyes, spikes, and organs. Later, other amazing fossil sites were found, from Xinjiang to Utah to Siberia, uncovering all new ecosystems and animals. The end of the Cambrian period, 485.4 million years ago, marked the decline of the Cambrian fauna, which underwent a drastic turnover into the Paleozoic fauna. The Cambrian Ordovician boundary was formally marked by the first appearance of jawless chordates called conodonts. Conodonts are jawless fish known for their distinctive tooth elements. They're so unique and abundant that these teeth elements would go on to define the start and end of many more geological periods. By the end of the Cambrian, chordates were evolving the first backbones, becoming true vertebrates. But while some animals kept pace with the evolutionary arms race, many others went extinct in the end Cambrian extinction. It's not quite clear what caused this extinction event, but some experts think that volcanic activity in modern-day South Africa depleted oxygen in the oceans. Trilobite species were hit hard, as were many brachiopods and conodonts. While these animal groups ultimately survived, we would never again see the five-eyed Opabinia or its family members like Eutorora or Kylynxia. This was the end of the road for many other Cambrian oddities. Waiwaxia, Hallucigenia, and the flamboyant Morella would also disappear forever. You start to swim back up to the surface, keeping the trilobite shell you collected as a little Cambrian memento. You take one last look at the living ones crawling across the shallow seafloor. This is their heyday. They would endure spectacularly and would thrive for almost 270 million years until they died out in the end Permian extinction. Beneath them you see Odontogryphus, a weird tongue-shaped animal with a circular mouth and a soft shell. This weird thing wouldn't survive that much longer. New evolutionary advantages were evolving, and more fearsome predators were on the horizon, from arthropods with fully developed claws to monstrous cephalopods as tall as trees. As we shift into the Ordovician period, the competition to stay alive will be more challenging than ever. If you're interested in learning about the worlds of deep time, make sure to like and subscribe.